Okay, so I want to make sure we have enough time to get to all of our stuff today, so I'm going to go over our data activity very briefly. This is a very short thing. This won't take very long at all, or shouldn't take very long at all. So the one thing we haven't really talked about very much yet is we've talked about different figures, different approaches to visual layout, etc. We haven't really explicitly talked about tables. So that's what the main thing we just wanted you guys to all take a stab at doing a table today. So table is another key way, a table is another key way to present quantitative information and to test a hypothesis, provide some detail of stuff, etc. So we've given you some real data. This is all real data. In this case, this is this is a CSV file. So when you go to the assignment, you can download this. It's a small file. And so I only gave you the one tab, right? Remember with CSVs, there are not tabs in that, so this is just the one you guys get. But essentially what we're looking at here are different risks associated with different ways of moving around, with different transportation modalities. So we have the modality here, commercial air travel, passenger cars, etc. And then we have a measure of something. In this case, we have it over here on the right in the column D. In this case, this is how many people pass away on average per million kilometers of movement with that particular transportation modality. And then how many people pass away at that rate. So we've worked to try to mostly get this fairly consistent. You'll notice it's not all consistent. Some units are different. But we put a lot of time in here to making sure this was, for the most part, pretty easy for you guys to see. So this is how many people are dying on different transportation modes. And then on the right, it's the CO2 emitted per unit moved per person with that particular methodology. And if you guys really want to dig into it, you can look over on the right and find the sources of stuff. And what we have right now is this first chunk is current. That's basically stuff in the last 10, 15 years. And then we have, if you scroll down, you'll see that on this A column, after a while it changes from current to historic. Historic is basically 70s or 80s. So it's basically the more recent situation and the situation several decades ago. Cool? And so you guys are going to make some sense of this. Now, tables, again, we haven't talked about it yet. There's just like we have some general design principles for graphical presentations of data, we have some general design principles for tabular forms of data. Now, there's no one perfect way, but just like we want to give some thought to what our data is, what's the big number, what's the small number, how does this thing relate to that thing, etc. You want to do that same thing when you get data, regardless of what form it's going to end up being at the end, right? So you want to take a look at what's the biggest value, what's the smallest value, what are the units. You want to do all that same stuff that you would do looking at any data set. In this case, instead of turning it into a scatter plot or something, let's say, we're going to put it in a text-based communication form. And so one simple thing you guys could try is, in this case, we've grouped it by the current story and the older situation, right? So that maybe that makes sense for the argument that you would like to make. Cool. Or maybe like, no, I want to more emphasize the differences between the now and the back in the day. And so in this case, what we've done here is same data, but now we've just lined it up. So instead of having layer one of the data and then below that the second layer, we've merged them all together. And so we have the same units, the same units reported in column D as in dog, but over here we've put side by side the current value and the value from back in the day. So it's much easier now to just kind of glance across and see, is that bigger or smaller? Make sense? A couple general design principles when we do a table. The numbers we want right aligned. Now, there's always exceptions, but we're going to talk about is just the first general thing, the way you should start all these. And every once in a while, there's a reason to change from them. but for the most part, let's start again. We're crawling before we walk, before we run. And so we have the numerical data all right aligned. Boom, 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 boom. So that makes it pretty easy. So this guy's 1.8, 5.7, 1.19. It's a lot easier for us to look it up. While not required, another one you might want to think about is to have the same number of decimals. And in this case, since we have a lot of decimals, and that would also help facilitate the comparison between a number above and a number below, that kind of thing. Okay? Next is the text is generally going to want to be left aligned. So the text alignment, numerical alignment are opposite as a starter position. So we'll see here that when I list hiking, sailing, ferry, the stuff is, the letters all start off on the left side of the cell, whereas the numerical values, they're off on the right side. Cool? Okay. Also, with this table form here, we're going to want to make sure that, and so let me ask you, that we've talked a little bit about this before, but let me ask you this, when might we want to use a table versus, you know, a bar chart or something like that? What's the advantage of using a table over another form of data presentation?
You can put more variables in it?
Possibly. Other ones? Yeah, usually it's specificity is what we're looking for. So we can imagine we have this data as a scatter plot, right? Let's say, and that's cool. Or for that matter, a bar chart or whatever. You know, that's cool. But we look up and go, okay, see, this one is bigger. This bar is bigger than that bar. Okay, cool. But I'm not exactly sure how much. So where tables are really good is if we're going to use something for reference. We're going to refer back to this. So perhaps it's a methodology. What's the right concentration of the salt we need to add to the liquid to be standard, you know, that kind of thing. Or maybe it's the required square footage for you know, insulation, the legal definition or something like that, right? So having those things for different conditions in a table, we go up and then we know the exact number. It's 2.39, and that's the answer. Also, tables are useful, not always necessarily for reference, but for making an argument. So if we had to make a judgment of something, so maybe this is the amount of lead that is in people's blood or something, and we want to look at the toxicological impact or whatever, it's much easier to go up here and look and build our argument by pulling off of study number 4 that found it was 4.31 rather than looking on a scatter plot or something of that nature. Does that make sense? As always, those are general guidelines, and they're generally, what I just told you is generally correct. You should mostly use those. There's of course always exceptions. There's always some exceptions where we might want to have a table because of the way the data falls out, or a figure because of the way the data falls out.
Like what David said.
Absolutely. And so so again, we want to think, we don't want to but also just like with our tabular, with our scatter plots or anything else, we also don't just want to randomly throw data up here, right? There should be some sense to this, so that we're still trying to help our audience see the patterns, see the takeaway, see the conclusion, right? And so we also want to put some thought into how we line stuff up. In some cases, maybe it makes sense to make it alphabetical, the category. So maybe that would be like the reference level of some drug or something, right? And so, maybe I look up the name of the drug. So in that case, okay, maybe I want to alphabetize them. In other cases, maybe we want the largest value at the top, right? So maybe we might sort it by magnitude of the variable. And so on and so forth. So there's different, and again, there's many ways you could slice and dice this data, but you want to have a logical argument so that it's easy for the first viewer of this to sort of get the big picture. Another difference between tables and figures is our legend. So while you can have a title in both, where the legend, the main thing where you're describing it and providing any additional details you need, with a figure, it is always underneath. It's always at the bottom. With a table, it's always at the top. And so all I've done right here is just grabbed a small subset of our overall data. And just to show you guys a couple quick things. So in this case, I've grabbed it and I've pasted it into Word. But a similar function will happen in Google Docs, although again, Google Docs is nowhere near as sophisticated and it's a lot harder to control this. But so all I did here was just select, copy so I got the data prepped and cleaned and adjusted, etc. in this case, Excel sheet, and then I copied it and I put it into this document. I could also insert a table and build a table from my own without copy and paste and just manually typing stuff in. So both are an okay way to go. I can tell this is a table because in Word, I have this funky little symbol up here. So if I click on this, instead of highlighting one word or one sentence or one letter or whatever, the whole thing lights up. And so this blue thing is actually what Word is seeing as a table. And so if we look at it, it sure looks like Excel, right? We have rows, we have columns. I can insert rows below. I can grab the right-hand side and adjust the width and all that kind of stuff. As I do this, one of the most and so we can go mess around with this. We can change the fonts and do all that kind of good stuff. One thing that I'll take that back. I want you to give some, we want you to give some consideration to, is to formatting, okay? So whereas with our figures, we can make something redder, or we can make it a dash line or whatever. Same thing here. But you don't have as many things to choose from, right? We have basically, we have alignment of the item within the cell. We have how big the font is and this and that. So the two things that are most helpful to us are color, or what is known in a table as shading, so the background color. And then right now, this is a naked table. So there's just, when I have clicked off of it like this, I can't tell where the end of the activity column ends and the start of the death value current column starts. In general, that's probably good, right? That's kind of helpful. But you can imagine that as my table starts to get bigger or more complex, I might want to help or if I have many more columns or something, it might start to become a little hard. And so the two main tools we have for that, and if I click on this, it's going to open up a ribbon, a table. In this case, it's called Table Design ribbon. But I could also click on this guy and go up here. So maybe it looks like this. I can go up here and I can click Table Design and get to it that way. And so for example, I have a shading bucket here, right? And again, this can look slightly differently depending on our dialog boxes, but it's the same idea. So I could pick maybe these guys. And I could come up here and I could say, oh, I want them to be, I don't know, light gray or something like that, right? Or maybe that's too dark. So we go, oh, okay, yeah, no, I don't want to do that. I want to make it, very light blue, or I don't know. You can mess with stuff, right? And so I could have every other row, let's say, colored, or every other column, depending on what I want. Also, if I do or don't like that, I can also come in and visually reinforce the different cells or columns or rows or whatever. So in this case, let's say I decide, I really want to have the death value selected. And so I can come up to here, and this is called border, right? So I can make a border, and I can make the bottom of the cell have a border, the top have a border, all the sides have the border, whatever I want to do that. And when I do that, I can come up here and say, I really want that guy. Okay, so that one made all of my cells that border, but I can go in and I can pick the color, I can pick just a subset, etc. So you have access to shading and you have access to borders. Again, you don't have to use them, but you at least want to try a little bit. Turn them on for a minute or two and just make sure you guys are familiar with that. I would say this, I don't know if this brings, just what I've done right here, right now, I don't know if putting a border around every single cell, that seems a little distracting to me, right? So just like everything else, in many of the stuff as we're learning this, try it. Just like going to the eye doctor. A or B? Turn that on. Does that make it easier to read? Yes, no, okay. Undo or change the color or whatever. Again, key things here are going to be, somebody can look at this and very clearly see the main takeaway that we're looking at. Or if it's some type of just pure reference table, which is, I would say this is not that, but if it was, it's very easy for you to walk up and navigate it very quickly. One last thing before I forget, William, remind me. This guy, many of you have not done this, and so I want to make sure that you know about this. And that is, so if we look at this, tables are oftentimes very, very long relative to their width, or very, very wide relative to their length, right? And so you and I are used to having, like the quiz you just took, this 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, right? So we're used to having our document be longer than it is wide, right? In some cases, because of the way the table is laid out, it might be better to be the reverse. It might be better to be wider, and it doesn't need to be quite as tall. And so do realize you guys always have that as an option. So I'm back in my Word document here. And so what I'm going to do, and if you want to do this, it's a little bit cleaner. You can do it in the midst of it, but it's a little cleaner to do it the first step before you paste your data in or before you paste your table in. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to go up to my page. I'm going to do page setup. And then again, the dialog will look slightly different depending on what version of Word or Google Doc you have. But I have an option here that's landscape or portrait. The way that you're used to seeing your paper is portrait. The way I've set this one up in my example is landscape. So it's the same exact thing. It's just if you were to print it up on your regular printer, instead of the words coming out, this way, it's just going to be turned 90 degrees. And so that's totally fine to submit a PDF that's that orientation. We can handle that, no problem. But so that's a little helpful suggestion to change your page orientation before you get going.